Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. How great is it to see this room packed for today's reading? Give yourselves a hand. Give yourselves a hand. Great. I have just about 2 minutes ago been given the honor of doing the introduction before the true introduction for today's poets. My name is Suzanne Clary, and I want you to know that we have to thank, and we love to thank, the Bydale Foundation, the David G. Taft Foundation, NJSCA and Arts Westchester, and certainly not least, all of you for being here today. The introducer for the poets is the inimitable poet, Mervyn Taylor. He's very well known as a poet and perhaps not quite as well known as a wonderfully talented visual artist. He contributed to the chapbook that we are here to celebrate today. So I am very pleased to introduce to you Mervyn Taylor.
Welcome, everybody. Wow. Russell, where are you? You're something else. You fill this place, man. I can't believe it. Sunday evening, Sunday afternoon, when there's a big Knicks game on, Knicks, everybody is here. That's just amazing. Amazing. Great. Okay. So welcome, everybody. This is Slappering Hall Chapbook winner, 2023, Russell Karrick. Yeah, I got that right? Yeah, just amazing, amazing. So this is the 2023 Sanger-Stewart reading, and I'll talk about two people. There's Russell, and then there's his mentor, Renée Ashley. I think I have that right. Okay. So I'll say a little bit about Renée, and then we'll talk about Russell, right? Oh, also, let's talk a little bit about the editors former editors who are here. There's Margot Taft-Stever, our chief editor, Susanna Case, and the other person shall remain under. Renée Ashley's publications include Minglements, Prose on Poetry and Life, and 7 volumes of poetry. The most recent, Ruined Traveler, Otis Books, Otis College of Art and Design, The View from the Body, Black Lawrence Press, and Because I Am the Shore, I Want to Be the Sea, Subito Book Prize, University of Colorado, Boulder. A portion of her poem, First Book of the Moon, is included in a permanent installation by the artist Larry Kirkland in Penn Station, New York City. Wow, that's amazing. She has received fellowships in both poetry and prose from the NJSCA and a fellowship in poetry from the NEA. She taught for 20 years at Fairleigh Dickinson University's MFA in Creative Writing and the MA in Literature and Creative Writing for Educators. She lives in northern New Jersey. People always want to laugh at New Jersey. Take that. See? And Russell Karrick is the author of The Way Back. Is the winner of the 2023 Slappering Hall Press Chapbook Competition. He's a recipient of World Literature Today's Student Translation Award and Lunch Tickets Gabo Prize for Literature in translation and multilingual texts. His poetry has appeared in Redivider, The Offing, Bat City Review, Spoon River Poetry Review, and Magma Poetry, among others. He earned his MFA in creative writing from Fairleigh Dickinson University. Wonderful. Okay. Russell Karrick's The Way Back. Russell Karrick's The Way Back is an adventure. Places and things as seen through the poet's eyes. But the poet is not a tour guide, and the way back is no ordinary journey. It is as metaphorical as well as actual, and what we see often coming dangerously close, like the lion to the safari truck. Our joy, like that of the poet, is always under threat. Each morning, one more feather on the tip of the tiger's tongue, from a poem titled Delirium. We write, ostensibly, to share experiences since we can't possibly have them all. And in the telling, there's what we intend, and then there's what happens. The result, hopefully, is poetry, which allows for signs and omens not possible in the real world, but made believable and exciting in the poet's hands. The moon, he says, stays full for 3 days. By extending such phenomena, Karrick moves onto a spiritual realm. The incense burner believes the smoke carries prayer to the gods. There's the daily battle for our souls between the sacred and the profane. The sound of the temple gong versus the laughter of drunken men. Even with love, things go wrong. A woman's hair let down becomes darkness. In the midst of such conflict, what is the poet's role, even as his own life unfolds? Karrick summons the work of artists whose creations have explored and exposed the human condition. Time and again, he references Botero's bird perched next to its mangled twin. And here I must quote his mentor, Renée Ashley, who writes, that incisive, elegant juxtaposition of images and blistering diction renders me speechless every time I read it. Good mentor. In another instance, the poet begs the sparrows with their mournful brown beaks to translate sorrow into song. So all the way through this book, there's this back and forth between finding it and losing it, between the two. This is what makes it incredible. What is humanity's response to the fate that is present every day? We give flowers to please and appease. Hibiscus and frangipani. The tropical landscape of this book accommodates this. The Way Back is set in Colombia, where the poet says, the emotional spiritual is matched to the physical. I don't know if I'm closer to God, but I'm closer to the equator. Here, ritual doesn't seem ridiculous. I burn my maps and smear ash on my face, lay on my belly like a snake. If he'd done that in New York, they would lock him up, right? But he could do it. He could, but he could do it there. And then he went on after several experiments to actually do the snake design that is on the cover of the book. So again, amazing. COVID, says the writer, actually did some good. Humans stopped moving, and now the mountains are visible, as are the stones in the river. He examines the fruits, how on the inside they are like us, but he keeps it real. I watched a guava fall from my grandmother's hat, he says. And there are violets between the pages of the Bible. In these poems, the lines match the author's physical progress. Sometimes the poem is allowed to drift, to find its own way to the end, as in the old city. The spiritual meets the religious in one clear image, Jesus standing barefoot in the mud. Something else happens too in the way back. Everything runs parallel. The birth of his son, or the coming of his son, or the expected birth of his son. The child in the womb is also part of this way back. And I think that boy is here today, right? Which is just amazing. Yeah. The first time we read this book in manuscript form, by we, I mean the former editors, it moved our then chief editor, Margot, to begin exploring ways to raise funds in hope of maybe publishing 2 winners that year. This was not to be, and the way back was adjudged first runner-up. It's a testimony to Karrick's faith in his book being so strong. He resubmitted it almost unchanged. I imagine him getting the results that year, first year, and saying, no, they must have missed something. And happily, we got to look at it again. The job of editing is a reciprocal one. As editor, you realize anew each time what is involved in making a book of poetry. The use of imagination, the way images are strung together, the music, the tricks of the trade, the terrific job of ordering the poems after the task of attending each one individually is done. And then begins the dialogue, the changes suggested, considered, dismissed, refuted, allowed, and the joy when a single shift brings the whole chorus together and the writer finds what he was looking for all along. Please welcome Russ. And just to let you know that you're all part of this, we have a celebration after the reading at Margot Stevens' house, 157 Millard Avenue, Sleepy Hollow, just up the street. Everybody's invited.
Hello, everybody. It's fantastic to be. Can I raise this a little bit? Or no? There we go. All right. First of all, thanks for everybody for being here in support of this this collection The Way Back. It means a lot to me. So many beautiful, familiar faces and unfamiliar faces, but it's so lovely. Is it speak direct? Is it? Bam. How's that? Yes. Is that better? All right, here we go. All right. So even with a collection such as this of 20 poems, there's always a lot of thanks in order because it's always a lot of people that also come in to helping get this book out into the world. But first of all, I would love to thank my wife, Paula, and my little boy, Rio, because if it wasn't for them, this book, this journey, this exploration, it wouldn't even exist. So thank you for all the inspiration to be able to write these poems. And also to my mentor who's here, who get the lucky opportunity to read with, which is beautiful how the winner gets to read with their mentor. It's truly a beautiful thing. If there's a single person in this room, in this world that has taught me the most about the craft of poetry. It's undoubtedly Renée Ashley. So thank you, Renée. And then also, obviously, to Slappering Whole Press, Hudson Valley Writers Center. Thank you to everyone that contributed to this book, especially Mervyn, Margot, Susanna. You were with me every step of the way. I felt the support. Any kind of question email I had, we were in correspondence for, I don't know, that 6 or 7 months, what it was. So thank you all very much for being along with me on this journey. All right. So before I start reading the poems, I wanted to talk a little bit about the way back and even the image that's on the front. I was extremely fortunate enough to be able to design the art because I believe that the image is as much a part of the title as is the text for me. And in many ways, it's a reminder of the cyclical nature of time. We tend to live in a world of very linear and rational time, which seems to be a construct, right? A very male, masculine, proud, rigid construct. And while rational time is important, I don't think it is of the utmost importance. And I think it's cut us off a lot, far more and more from the earth, from what sustains us, and from who we are. And in many ways, this book, this journey helped me find and get in tune with those natural rhythms, those natural cycles. And so for me, this was a beautiful journey. So I will begin here with the epigraph because I believe it helps touch on those cycles and natural rhythms, and how that if we pay attention, how we can learn from nature and how to move through this life. I was listening to a podcast with Jane Hirschfield, and she had a friend who was writing a book on Zen Buddhism. And he was terrified. He's like, I have to write a comprehensive book on Zen Buddhism, and I can only use 60,000 words. And she was like, Jesus, I feel bad for you. I could sum it up in 7. And she says, everything changes. Everything is connected. Pay attention. And then she said, you know what? I think you can boil down to 2 words, honestly. Pay attention. And it's one of her quotes where attention is the key to the kingdom. And so there's the small opening poem. Secret jewel of the river, your wet feet glint in the sun as you move around the gray stones undivided. Here's Delirium. It's the opening poem of the collection. We used to drink rain in the garden until the fruit fell and rotted. Now I wear a scarf of frost and claw at the wounds below my skin. We folded our feathers at dawn, perched in the fruit trees, and sang the holy songs of our Father. Lately, I barely lift my head to gaze at the horizon. Tribes used to mold clay and worship our mother until the mountain's blood drained into our rivers. I wake up screaming, each morning one more feather on the tip of the tiger's tongue. This next poem I'd like to share, it's a perspective poem, coming of age poem about grief. I think it's humorous in some ways. I think when we're younger, we tend to think, things are split into dualities, right? But we realize the world isn't black and white. Things like good and evil are oversimplifications of a complicated and complex world that we live in. And so I wrote this poem called On Being the Age of Jesus. My grandfather insisted all I need to know about life I could learn in the garden. I imagine him here today picking cherry tomatoes and warbling with the warblers. If you ask a botanist, a tomato is a fruit. It's seed-bearing and sprouts from a flower. If you ask a chef, it's a vegetable. He'll rave on about flavor and tell you it's taxed as such. I'm 33 and feel like I know less by the day. I can hear my grandfather's voice saying, "It's better this way." He says, "Now is the time you gain strength spiritually." I don't know if I'm any closer to God, but I am closer to the equator. In Chiapas, I burned all of my maps into a pile of ash and smeared it across my face. Tonight, I lay on my belly like a snake and hug the earth's dust. The next poem is The Old City. This title refers to the old city of Cartagena. It can be a Disney World of sorts for adults. Life is very different inside the walls of the old city versus outside the walls of the old city. Can be very different, extreme, right? I will note, I think it's important, Palenque, or San Basilio de Palenque, was the first free town for Africans in the Americas, and it was founded by those who fled a life of slavery in colonial times. I don't think you necessarily need to know that for the poem, but I think it'll help you navigate the poem's subtleties. This is called The Old City. Here, you won't see the old man shaving a pig's face. Dusk settles on white jasmine and bougainvillea petals strewn across cobbled streets. A carriage horse clops past the plaza, and outside the Santa Clara, a woman in red is wounding men. Sweat drips from the face of a palanquera who busses to the old city every day from San Basilio de Palenque. And though the day drags away with the sun, she still lifts up the corners of her mouth, raises the frills of her tri-colored dress, and steadies a bucket of mangoes on her head in front of a bright, crumbling wall. Yesterday, a carriage horse collapsed, and its driver was beaten by a mob in the street. This next one is a poem very dear to me. It's a poem about my first encounter with my wife, Paula, in Lisbon. How fate would have it to put us in adjacent beds in a hostel. It was the first time she ever spent the night in a hostel. She was a hotel gal. But she figured she'd slum it a little bit and see what the hostel was like. And mixed dorm. We were both coming out of relationships. Not even thinking about romance, but it's a poem about how love can find us when we least expect it. It's called The Feast of Saint Anthony. Sweet basil and grilled sardines infused the streets. And Alfama, I took your hand as we slipped through the crowd, past the pop-up bars while lovers gathered at San Igreja de Santo Antonio. We'd met the day before at the hostel, both unaware of the feast until we arrived. We wandered the city for hours. You told me about a blue town you loved in Morocco and how you saw your father's ghost on a cliff in the Algarve. We talked about a pilgrim route up the coast and how I spent 2 weeks in the Black Forest walking off a divorce. The following night, we listened to a woman sing fado. Her hands rose from her belly to her chest, forming fists that shook the air. Fado means fate, from the Latin fatum, for what's been spoken. When St. Anthony's words fell on deaf ears, he preached by the shore. That night we saw a shoal of silver fish flash under the half moon. This next poem, it's funny, as a writer, you tend to write poems, and the poems you think are good ones, I feel like rarely ever get picked up. And then the poems that are like, oh, yeah, I wrote the poem. Man, let me send it out. They love it. I don't get it. It's a mystery to me. It's a mystery. But this is one of those poems, but it's funny. I'm happy it sat with me. And I feel like out of this book, I feel like this is the one poem that probably has caught the most attention, at least from people that I've spoken with. And it's an important poem to me because when I first went to Medellin, which is where I currently live now, outside of the city. But when I first went there, going back maybe 8 years, it was to visit Paula, who was living there at the time. And we went down to Botero Plaza, And it's Fernando Botero is a famous Colombian artist, and he makes these amazing, well, sculptures, paintings as well. But where she brought me is the Botero Plaza, and outside there's, I don't know, maybe 20 to 30 of these large, voluptuous sculptures of people, of animals. And when I first saw the bird, it was just ripped and torn open. And I'm looking at the sculpture like, whoa, what's that? And then I looked a little bit down and another one was fully intact there. So I was like, oh, what's this about? And I read on the plaque that in the mid 90s, a bomb was placed at the base of the statue and it exploded, killed 30 people, wounded hundreds. And Botero, I sounded like a pure gringo right there, huh? Botero, he agreed to donate another identical sculpture on the terms that the original remain. And for me at that point, not only was it a story about a country and its past into a brighter future where it was moving, but I also saw a lot of it in the personal as well. And so for me, it was as much personal as universal. And so I wrote this poem called The Dove. When we walk home at night in Medellin, you still move closer if a motorcycle approaches, and I think of Botero's pájaro, its back and belly blown out. When you were younger, leaving the city meant risking kidnap. But now, in Kokora Valley, you lead the way through the jungle. Most local tourists still stay below the cloud forest on horseback or in the parking lot posing for pictures. At Finca La Montaña, bearded limbs and bright flowers flare against the hills. In the low valley, wax palms pierce the wispy clouds and the slow glow of vermilion steeps through the mist. I think again of Botero's bird, Pájaro de Paz, whole and untroubled, perched next to its mangled twin. This next poem is titled Green Mangoes. And it's funny, when I first arrived into Colombia, my wife loves green mangoes. And it was a question of, is a green mango different from a regular full sweet mango? And I asked tons of people and I always got a different answer. Some said yes, some said no. I looked it up and it's pretty much just a tiny baby green unripe mango. It's just a lot more bitter, and people usually eat it with salt. Um, but my wife loves them. My little guy loves them. He just woke up. And they grow all over the city, which is amazing. So this poem is titled Green Mangoes. I planted a tree in the backyard, and for every leaf I offered a blessing to our son. When we first saw him, he looked like a tiny astronaut floating in space. His heart was the size of a star seen from Earth. It gave birth to the same primordial wonder. Lost my place. After the doctor visit, we parked on a side street. I climbed onto the car and picked green mangoes for you. It rains almost every afternoon, but our tin roof gives each drop a bright voice. At home, we ran onto the hillside naked and waited for the next crash of thunder before running back inside. That night, I dreamt I saw his face in the pale underbelly of a wet leaf. This next poem is called Epiphany. I'm learning about life from the bottom up. I mouth the names of things light doesn't touch, like roots that grow in the gaps between our words in songs sung by the dead. When it storms, their voices rise like fish to the river's surface. I bait them with bread until their brilliant scales are a chorus in my palms. Their songs are full of hunger, so I eat for them. I sink my blade into each belly, and where the edge meets their flesh, I see flakes of snow, a glowing red puddle, and Jesus standing barefoot in the mud. think this is the one poem. No, there's a couple poems in here that never got picked up. This was one of the ones that I thought surely would have gotten picked up somewhere along the line, but I guess nobody liked it. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. Anyway, when I moved to Colombia, I read Cien Años de Soledad, 100 Years of Solitude by Marquez for the first time. Blew my mind. I wish I would have read him earlier, younger. But either way, fell in love with Marquez. 2020 came around. I ended up winning the Gabo Prize for literature and translation from Lunch Ticket, and it kind of meant a lot to me, especially living in Colombia at that time, and really starting to read a lot of Latin American poets and reading Marquez. And so this is kind of a pandemic poem. I started reading Love in the Time of Cholera, kind of when lockdown started to happen. And so I wrote this poem called Love in the Time of COVID-19. It's beetle season, which means these slow-crawling, clumsy-winged cucarones are not dying fast enough. I wake up to the hut, hut, hut of black ants marching off with a claw, tibia, antenna. The savage dogs still howl at 5 a.m., but the birds sing lovelier than ever. My son is 8 months old and teething, more monster than man, 2 mandibular central incisors, a gopher with an underbite, my petite prince, and I, the drunken father who drinks to forget the shame of drinking. I eat roses and leave sonnets in sugar bowls for my wife. At sunset, we drink Merlot and swat mosquitoes from a hillside that's now overgrown because the bereaved son sold off his father's cows. The people of Bogota, for the first time in 40 years, can see the snow-capped peak of El Nevado del Tolima. I read that Cartagena Bay is bluer than ever, that you can see the round stones lining the bottom of El Rio Medellin. My son is calmed by the color green, so most afternoons we walk through the forest. My wife and I spy on butterflies, barter rosemary for red onions with neighbors we now call friends. This morning my Bible fell from the bookshelf and I found dried violets between the pages of Ecclesiastes. All of life is a vapor, a mist, vanity, here today and gone tomorrow. At sunset, we'll return to the hillside and listen to the beetles hiss in the tall grass. I wrote this poem for my son on his first birthday. I call my son Old Testament while he stores food in his cheeks and swings a stick twice his size. I count the things he destroys, beginning with my sleep. The wax ivy and betel leaf plants, any dream that resembles a hot cup of coffee or restful Sunday morning. Yesterday, he caught a cricket between his 2 tiny fingers and made organ music of its insides. My wife shrieks as he digs his claws into her cheek, and I think maybe we shouldn't be so nostalgic. For all we know, Adam was in the garden, snarling at God. And this is the last poem that I'll share. It's the last poem of the collection. It's one that definitely holds a near and dear place in my heart. We had moved into this beautiful house kind of during the pandemic. And each night at dusk, I would take my little guy out. Wasn't quite walking just then. And there was all these senderos, these little walkways carved in the mountain. There was a river close by. And each night we would try to find something new, a new hidden natural treasure. And this poem is called At Dusk. Perched in the branches of the avocado tree, the chickens are almost asleep. My son lifts his head from my chest and points to them. Each day I carry him through the yard at dusk and we hunt for seasonal treasures. Tonight he spies Amanita muscaria below the pines, and we marvel at its ruby caps. In the sky, the moon is not yet a moon, but I whisper its name into his ear. And as I begin to walk back toward the house, he stops me near the guava trees. I move us closer while he stretches his arm, and by some instinct I've long lost to reason, plucks the only red fruit among the leaves. Thank you.
Hey. Yeah, that's all right. First husband. That might do it. Look at that. Need a man around the house. I think you should congratulate Russ again. He is really, at this point, a master of image making, which is where the feeling lies. And I think you need to give him another hand. And now it's the Bert and Ernie show. Reading during allergy season is always a challenge. This is a slant sestina for anybody that cares. For Bridget in Illinois. Dear Bridget, come back. Here the quiet moon burns like hayfire over the mountain. The lush rose, wild as milkweed, burgeons in the dark on the roadside where, in daylight, you saw yourself in the stark yellow eye of the grackle. I never really thought you'd leave. Now, your words, dusky as bird wings, rise. You reckon the distance between our lives. I can hear you thinking. What I know is the good sober will burns in you like insatiable fire. You never lost it. The leaves in May, do you remember, burst from their delirious twigs and rose sharp as saw teeth in the generous sky. I thought God had made his glorious point right there outside the body, in the visible heaven where a new green sighed and the air shimmered like the coruscating pond. You spoke of angels with bodies, the soul focusing its bright eye on substance, the solace of a promised resurrection, the burning need for coming together again. I believed every word. We rose like spirits ourselves, two souls glad of understanding, the leaves about us, above us like dreams. We thought no one ever really leaves. In this life, we were wrong. In this life, the issue of where you reside matters. I miss you. The house finch, hungry and rose-colored, takes his thistle like alms. He is humble and strong. You would like that. Now, all around me, the bright tongue of God unfurls and burns. You must see it in the plains, the gold light of morning, the violet dusk. I trust we still share the vivid heavens, the idea of the mountains. I leave that to recall. The way they rise beneath God's feet, the way the leaves they crown and catch them like vast explosive lights and burn around and around the countless birds who live invisibly on the mountainsides. Nothing is the same. The landscape is too big without you. I imagine the flat land where you live, linear, predictable, innumerable, placid rows, inexhaustible greens, lush golds keen as the level eye of the grackle as he rose, and you saw yourself go with him. We never understood the birds, their cold eyes like small stones or like glass. The ambivalent fires rage inside their hollow bones. You must understand that now, the way I understand or think I do, the taking leave of a place you love, and the way sorrow, its quiet shadow ebbing, one day subsides. Nothing is forever. Come back. Tonight the night burns in the 1,000 treetops, and the fire leaps even from the pale rose, its leaves, its fine myriad thorns. It springs from the eyes of the dark sleeping birds, from the undersides of their dark wings. You must close your eyes. Come home. We'll watch the red finch burn. If you don't know the poetry of Bridget Pegging Kelly, please find it. Oh, did she? Amazing, amazing poet. I've been working on prose poems for a long time. First, I was a lineation nut, and now I'm a paragraph nut. So the last couple of books have been prose poems, mostly. Contemplation within the framework of a dream. Consider the custom of likeness or unlikeness fit as the moon to a sky. Let one point light up, let it be relative to that, the speed of that. Let something quite real cry out. The dead still, the dead still insisting, still making themselves known, their bodies ill-fit and mostly self-inflicted. They change the story, a pattern of escalation, of furthering and backing off, embellishment. There is no space big enough for me to speak into about this. Any little human thing might act as balm. What is your confession? Some of these are new to me all over again. Excuse me. Oh, I'd read that poem. What we don't understand. Epigraph. Myth gives man, very importantly, the illusion that he can understand the universe and that he does understand the universe. It is, of course, only an illusion. Levi-Strauss. What we don't understand looks up at us and begs. It sits up, bends its outstretched paws at what would be the wrists. We think it looks like us or something like us, but different somehow. It has a tail. And there's something in the eyes, something deep, but it wears strange clothes, a collar, thick fur. And it knows we're lost. We haven't got a clue. Wouldn't know one if we saw one. And it's true, we don't, wouldn't. But its tail thumps like our poor hearts beating. And what we don't understand welcomes us home, gives out its message in sharp, nearly comprehensible bursts. We love that. And we bark back, our blunt tongues wagging. We think what we don't know loves us. But we can't even call it by name, so we give it a name. It's mysterious. And for all we know, we might be saying footstool, pig's eye, or rich black dirt. We'll never be sure. But we go on and we brag. We write long, painful essays on our progress. Others read them. But what we really understand is this: we want. And what we don't comprehend is unfathomable. What we hear is the wind and our own fears rumbling. But we could be mistaken. We are often mistaken, and so little is visible. For instance, the wind and what we do not know, what we don't understand, what sounds like it might be our home, unknowable wind in the black, thumping heart of the world. I'm getting a new dog. I have a series of poems that are spread out throughout this book called From Her Book of Difficulties. It's a, it's a way of whining, but with cadence. They asked her, "How do you know when a poem is done?" And she answered, "A pall falls over the earth." Then there's a shiver and the light comes on. Everything is healed again. Then she added, "Figure the supreme problem in your infinitesimally world, solved, but that world so small, it does not register in geologic time. Not a tick or a semi-tick's worth. Just the nano seizure of pleasure, then the relentless wheel of what next, and then what next. There is, it appears, always another thing wrong with the world." I'm glad to hear the laughter because I think I'm hilarious, and so often I'm the only one. It's kind of sad. I have two poems called White, and this is the second one. Makes no difference to you at all. Every once in a while, something in the news grabs me and tries to kill me. So this is White, and an epigraph: "Teens charged in Swan's death. Youths grabbed the bird when he came to the defense of his mate, held him down, stabbed him, and cut off his head with a hunting knife." The Rockland Journal News. Trespass and the bright stars deep behind the willows, those boys in their sallow skins vaulting the low fence, shortcutting the path. Cool midnight and the nacre of moonlight around them. Then fear, a white thing beating, the breadth of a pond alone in the span, the white hiss, the gates of those mad hearts slamming. That much fast light, how quickly the knife must have cut. It is important to believe this. What else could they do but savor what moved with such white speed, with so much fire that it burned that brightly? What else is our fear but a white thing hanging? What is memory but some furious white hissing our names? Everything moves quickly in moonlight, no matter what we cross over, no matter how close these beaten hearts. We live our endless lives with one white cry, with the dazzling, indelible shame. I'm going to close with this because I think it's hilarious. It's called What, Sweetie? And the epigraph is, "Death means whatever death means, sweetie." Man to his wife overheard, I swear. And endlessly so, but not again, I think, hence the confusion. Picture this: A single graceful hillside washed in light, off center, the dark back of someone, that condescending shithead, for instance, receding. Imagine that you cannot hear the soles of his shoes shushing against the grass. Conjure up a blank sky, call it a blue that rises through the spine and carries on without us, drops the living from here to here again. So many distractions, and that unlikely thing named what? Still in the backseat driving. There we are, bending over the wreckage again, once more down, and one hay in a haystack. Oh, sweetie, perhaps now that you have come, I will try to lift my little head.
I'm telling you, a better Sunday was never spent. Thanks, Russell, for that wonderful book. You know, people sometimes don't value chapbooks as they do full-length collections, but chapbooks have their own place in the world, believe me. They concentrate and keep you in a ravine where you cannot escape at all. The bigger books, you can, yeah, they keep you there. As with a mentor like you, I don't think he could do anything else. You know? But what a wonderful dragon lady. You make people laugh, right? You spit your fire and then everybody's burning to a crisp, but laughing all the way, you know. But thank you so much, and thanks to Hudson Valley and the young people here who have graciously turned on the lights for us too, right? It's wonderful. And thanks to everybody for coming. I mean, what an audience. This is just amazing, you know. And poets suffer, believe me. I remember my friend Dawad took his son when he was about 3 or 4 to a reading in Queens. And I think at the end of the, only 2 people in the audience, his son and a lady in a broad hat. And the son after the reading said, "Dad, is this what you're going to do, you know, like, well, the rest of your life? Just me and that lady in the hat." Yeah, well, he has kept it going, and maybe it just says something about guts, I think, you know, which you must have. But thank you, Russell, and Renee, thank you. So great to meet you and great to hear you. Your prose poems are wonderful too, by the way, you know. Yes, please buy the book, people. And also let me repeat that you're invited to the Stevers house, 157 Millard Avenue. It's about a 5-minute walk from here in Sleepy Hollow, this wonderful place. And this, so stay a minute, enjoy each other, and then we'll wander along. Thank you.